I was standing in line at the canteen when Jasmine, the biggest bully in school, pushed in front of me, almost sending me flying. No one said anything or checked if I was okay. I might as well have been invisible. What gave Jasmine the right to treat everyone like this? I was sick of it. And then something insane happened. The lunch lady asked Jasmine if she'd like an apple or banana, but of course Jasmine was too busy scrolling on her phone to notice. I somehow plucked up the courage to tap her on the shoulder and said to her, "Hey, she's talking to you. Apple or banana?" Suddenly, Jasmine dropped her phone and turned around to face me so fast, her hair almost whacked me in the face. I stuck my hand out like a shield, thinking she was going to get really angry, but instead, the complete opposite happened. She started touching my hair, asking what shampoo I used. Then she said, "I'll have the banana. Oh, and let me pay for your lunch. Has anyone ever told you how pretty you are?" I was speechless. As she walked off with her lunch tray, both me and the lunch lady just looked at each other in complete shock. My life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. Before I reveal what happened next, click like and subscribe to hear more crazy stories from My Story Animated. So there I was, standing with my lunch tray, paid for by Jasmine, completely confused about what she'd just done. I realized she'd left her banana on the counter, so I decided to take it over to her. As I got closer, I said, "Hey, you forgot this!" Well, I have never seen someone jump out of their seat so quick. Jasmine ran over to me and took me by the hand. Oh my god, she was actually touching me. This was so weird. Then she told her friend to move and give up her seat for me. I didn't want to say no in case she hurt me, but also I did not want to sit at a whole table full of bullies. This was my worst nightmare. As soon as I sat down, one of the other girls said to Jasmine, "Ew, what is that disgusting smell?" But Jasmine was too busy looking at me to even hear her. Then one of the other girls told me to beat it, and Jasmine turned around to her and said, "No, you beat it. Don't you ever speak to Rose like that again." I was stunned. What was wrong with Jasmine? Has she knocked her head or something? She started sniffing my hair and told everyone I smelled just like my name. Honestly, I was half expecting a reality TV show camera crew to jump out and say, "Gotcha!" Jasmine and her gang had bullied me my whole life. Why was she being nice to me all of a sudden? Had someone paid her to do this? I got up to leave and Jasmine grabbed my ankle and wouldn't let go. I ended up dragging her along with me, and when it became too much, I slipped my shoe off and started running. I could hear her shouting to her friends, "I got her shoe! I got her shoe!" as I ran towards the library. When I turned around, she was chasing me. It was like being some famous celeb and one of your fans is screaming your name. It freaked me out. She had almost caught up to me when I noticed the janitor's closet was open. I dived in, locking the door behind me. I was definitely being pranked. There was no other explanation. I could hear her calling my name and I didn't know what to do. I must have stayed in there for a good 10 minutes before everything went quiet again. The coast was clear, or so I thought. I walked out, totally oblivious to the toilet roll that was stuck to my foot. I was Cinderella with one shoe, but there was no Prince Charming waiting for me. Oh no, there was something much worse. As soon as I turned the corner, Jasmine jumped out. Her friends were nearby and they were all laughing at me. I noticed there was a banana peel lying in the hall and one of the girls was about to slip on it. I should have just let her slip, but I'm too nice for that. So I shouted out, "Look out! There's a banana peel!" That's when they all stopped laughing and ran up to join Jasmine, who was basically clinging onto me. They started saying things like, "Rose, come sit with us." "Rose, you're seriously the most beautiful girl in school." And then the bell rang for class and they practically picked me up and carried me to class. When we arrived at class, everyone stopped what they were doing and stared at me. I was the loner girl who was bullied, not the girl with friends. The teacher looked angry and started pointing at the board saying it was not okay to draw inappropriate things, but I didn't understand. It was just a banana, was it not? So I told her that, and normally people laughed when I spoke, but this time everyone was silent. It was like time had frozen and a spell had been cast over the whole world, over everyone, except me. The teacher broke out into a huge smile and said, "Rose, darling, you are the smartest student I have ever taught." Then she came over and gave me a hug, and everyone started clapping. As quickly as the clapping started, it ended. In walked the kids who were always late, the ones who bunked class most of the time, and who refused to follow the rules. There were about 10 of them, and as the last of them filtered in, we heard a scream. We all ran out to see what had happened, and lying in the hall was the biggest rebel of all. He was lying flat on his back, and his leg was bent in a funny position. He was screaming in pain, and that's when I realized he'd slipped on the banana peel. His friends were all asking what happened, so I shouted that it was the banana that had done it. The rebel crew just looked at me and said, "Freak." Then the school nurse came, and when I told her, she just ignored me. I was used to that kind of treatment, but what I didn't understand was why half the kids in class were treating me like I was suddenly important to them. Jasmine and her gang had even cleared out an old locker and decorated it in heart stickers. Inside was my shoe, and when I asked for it back, they just giggled and said they'd buy me new shoes. And then they started fighting over who would take me shopping. Of course, Jasmine won, and after school that day, as promised, she was waiting for me outside in her car. As I walked towards her, she was waving, but I still looked behind me to check if it was really me she was waving at. She went to the mall and she handed me her credit card and said I could buy whatever I wanted. Well, we splashed the cash. I could barely walk. That's how many bags we were carrying. And then we bumped into Sam, my crush's girlfriend. I couldn't stand her. She looked shocked and said to Jasmine, "Have you lost your mind? What are you doing with Rose?" I didn't know what came over me, but I whispered to Jasmine, "Tell Sam to never speak to you again." And Jasmine did it. Sam looked like she'd just seen a ghost. It was classic. Did I wake up with a superpower or something? What I couldn't figure out was why only some people were being nice to me. I tried to piece it together. What connected it all? I mean, my family weren't being any kinder to me. In fact, my brother was treating me worse than usual. At dinner, he basically threw a banana at my head. Oh my god. That was it! It all started with the banana at lunch. The next morning, even though it looked ridiculous, I dressed all in yellow. My family thought it was hilarious. But as soon as I got to school, things changed. And something had changed in me too. For the first time, I felt confident. I walked into the school with Jasmine and the girls on either side of me, and I shouted out, "Banana coming through!" Everyone started following me and complimenting me, and by the next day, everyone was dressed all in yellow. I had become a trendsetter, but there was still one person who hadn't noticed me yet, my crush Ben. I asked Jasmine where he was and if she could go get him for me. And to my complete shock, she practically sprinted to find him. When she brought him over, he looked pretty annoyed, and Sam, his demon girlfriend, was trailing behind him. As soon as Sam saw me, she started hysterically laughing and said, "Why are you dressed like that? You're just an embarrassment." And then I said to both her and Ben, "Don't you like bananas?" I wish you could have seen what happened next. Ben literally lunged at me, grabbed my face with his hands and said, "I love bananas, and I think I love you." Then he gave me a kiss on the cheek, and Sam looked like she was going to combust. She started screaming at me, but Ben just turned to her and said, "We're over. I want to be with Rose now." And that was when I realized this power I had was stronger than I ever could have imagined. I mean, I'd somehow won over the guy I'd have a crush on since first grade. This was a freaking miracle. After that, Ben didn't leave my side. He moved to sit next to me in class, and he started waiting for me outside the bathroom every time I went. I knew this couldn't be a prank anymore because it had been going on too long. This was for real. Sam was about to make my life hell, though. She wanted revenge and would stop at nothing to get it. One day, I arrived at school super early. I was headed to the library when I heard voices. Sam was sitting in a circle in our classroom with the rebels, pretty much the only people in school that weren't interested in me at all. I heard them saying my name, and I knew they were planning something. I snapped a photo of them through the door before running off. I had to stay on top of whatever they were up to. We had an exam that morning, and when the teacher arrived, I showed her the photo and said I'd seen Sam and the others looking for answers to the exam and that I thought they were planning to cheat. Immediately, the teacher called them in and suspended them for a week. And then when I sat down to do the exam, the teacher came up to me and said I didn't need to take it because she'd already given me an A+. I was shocked. This was the best. I had a boyfriend, best friends, and my teacher loved me so much I didn't even have to study anymore. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop worrying about what Sam was planning. Why couldn't I control her like I could everyone else? School was super peaceful that week without Sam, and my friends had a surprise for me. They took me out to the front of the school one lunchtime and told me to close my eyes. Part of me thought this would be the moment the camera crew would jump out. But then when I opened my eyes, there was a statue of me. Jasmine loved making statues, and she said she spent all her free time working on this. She called it the Rose, and it looked just like me. And it was covered in roses. I'd never seen anything so amazing before. For the rest of the day, everyone wanted their photo with me and my statue. It was crazy. Then, when we were all sitting in the last class of the day, the principal came over the loudspeaker and asked me to come to his office. I'd never been called there before, and I started to worry I was in trouble. When I got there, he pointed outside and asked why there was a statue of me, and did I think this was amusing. He said I could be suspended for vandalizing school property, and I started to panic. I told him I hadn't done it, but then he made me go outside and show him it. I didn't know if it would work, but while he was standing there, I whispered in his ear, "Banana." And it was like lightning. He immediately got down on his knees and started bowing to me. I looked over and Jasmine and her girl gang were running towards us and they started bowing too. Then they started chanting my name, and I'm not going to lie, even though it was the craziest thing that had ever happened to me, it felt pretty good. I felt powerful, like I could do anything I wanted. But then after school, Jasmine and her friends started picking on some of the juniors. Suddenly, I had all these horrible flashbacks of how they used to treat me, and I couldn't bear it. I screamed, "Stop!" at the top of my lungs, and they all turned to look at me. Of course, they listened to me and started apologizing to me. I told them it wasn't me they should be saying sorry to. It was the girls they were bullying. A crazy idea came into my head. With all this power I now had, I could create rules and make everyone follow them. So I asked Jasmine to gather up everyone in the school and meet me outside at my statue. 5 minutes later, everyone was standing around the statue, including some teachers and even the principal. And I told them all to sit down. Then I realized I needed a chair or something. And I told them this, and Jasmine said, "Rose, you don't need a chair. You need a throne." She was right. Then the principal jumped up and said I could use his office chair. A minute later, I was sitting on a green leather chair with a high wooden back, and Jasmine and the girls started decorating it with roses. They even made me a crown. It was insane. I sat down and told everyone I had an announcement to make. I came up with a list of rules, and the first rule was that bullying was not allowed under any circumstances, and that if someone was caught bullying, the bully would have to pay $300 to the victim and $300 to me for breaking the rule. Then I turned to Jasmine and her girl gang and said that all 7 of them had to pay up because I'd caught them bullying that day already. I saw their eyes go wide, but of course they got up and paid me and the victims, and some promised to pay the next day. And the victims were so grateful, I thought they were going to cry. But then I told them that wasn't all. There was more. They had to become friends with the people they'd bullied. I wanted everyone to be friends. They all stood up and replied in unison, "Yes, Rose! Whatever you say, Rose!" It was so spooky the way they all said it at the same time. I started thinking up more rules. I could seriously use my power to change this school for the better. I decided that they all needed a uniform, and just for fun, I asked them to wear shirts with my face on it. The next day, they all turned up in matching shirts, and my face was just everywhere. I even overheard the principal suggesting that the school change its name to the Rose School. There was just one worry in my mind. What would happen when Sam and the rebels came back to school? I couldn't figure out how to control them, so I decided I'd just have to make sure they weren't allowed to return to school. They would ruin everything that I was working so hard to create, and I couldn't let them do that. Now that I had the principal and most of the school in the palm of my hand, I could use them like puppets to make sure nothing bad ever happened around here again. The rise of Rose was fully underway, and no one was going to stop me now. Stay tuned for part 2, where I start to climb even higher and reign over the whole school. Being powerful never felt so good.